Welcome to this series of readings of the Mechanization concept, a manifesto by the Great Divine Director. There are 22 parts to these releases by the Great Divine Director. He has asked that they be read in the order of their release. I am Caroline Hansky, the reader. The teachings were given by the Great Divine Director through the messenger Mark L. Prophet in 1965. Permission was granted for reading them and making them available to the general public in audio form. These readings are from Mark and Elizabeth Prophet, The Mechanization Concept, The Mysteries of God on the Creation of Mechanized Man, Pearls of Wisdom, Volume 8, Teachings of the Ascended Masters, Summit University Press, copyright Church Universal and Triumphant, 1965. They are also published as Mark L. Prophet, the Soulless One, Cloning a Counterfeit Creation, copyright 1965, 1980, 1981, Summit University Press. Why would you want to listen to and or read these releases? Because the message in them is as important now, or even more so, as when it was originally delivered. The message is serious and ought to be taken seriously. The mechanical, non-human creation, not created by God ones, are among us and have been for thousands of years. We have taken on their consciousness to some degree and must free ourselves from it. Prayer and working on our psychology are two ways of doing this. But first, we must be aware of what the mechanical consciousness is. These releases by the Great Divine Director are for this purpose. What makes this so relevant at this time? If you are following the news of the development of robots for every conceivable purpose, then is it not curious that this is made to seem a new development? As these current robots are portrayed, they are obviously mechanical. Yet, just as obvious from the Great Divine Director teachings is the fact that the robots that have been on the earth for thousands of years appear like humans. We don't know the difference. Then why is it important to make us think this is a new advanced development? Something to ponder. The Great Divine Director is a cosmic being with many offices in the spiritual hierarchy. For example, he is a member of the karmic board in which he represents the first ray of God power. He is known as the Great Divine Director because he has merged his consciousness with the cosmic cycles of God's divine plan for untold universes of light. Great Divine Director is a title of an office in the cosmic hierarchy, given to the one who, by virtue of diligent application over the eons, focuses within his causal body the formula of the ascension for the children of God and the sons and daughters of the Most High evolving in this cosmos. The causal body is the spiritual part of us in which is stored our attainment, all merit we have ever accrued, our treasures stored in heaven. The Great Divine Director's causal body is a giant blue sphere that surrounds the entire planet. Thus, his attainment of cosmic consciousness qualifies him to ensoul the flame of divine direction on behalf of Earth's evolutions and untold lifeways beyond. The Great Divine Director long ago passed those initiations that placed him at cosmic levels of service and qualified him to become the Manu of the seventh root race. A Manu embodies the archetype for an entire life wave of souls who will incarnate on Earth at a certain period, including the divine image and likeness out of which they are made and the pattern of their destiny. The seventh root race is destined to embody first in South America under the Great Divine Director, and so he presides spiritually over the continent of South America. He is then the lawgiver and sponsor of the seventh root race, the one who holds the blueprint for the entire race of the souls who begin their embodiment in the age of Aquarius that is now dawning. Godfrey Ray King, author of the book, The Magic Presence, describes the Great Divine Director in it. This majestic being stood fully 6 feet 4 inches in height, with wavy hair that fell to his shoulders and looked like sunshine on gold. His robes glittered with points of light like jewels that flashed continually with the tremendous radiance of the power held under his control and obedient to his conscious direction. The girdle encircling his waist was a mass of sapphires and diamonds. From it hung a panel to a few inches below the knees. This also was a mass of jewels. End of quote. The great divine director has said, I pray that you will call to me, for I have within my consciousness the scroll of the divine plan for every living soul on Terra and in the vast beyond. The Mechanization Concept, a manifesto by the great divine director, part U, You. To you who are the created image, know thy creator. Know him as thy true self. Know thyself in him, and thereby assume the robe of responsibility to multiply the loaves and fishes of life and to feed the multitudes, the living word. There is a vast difference between creator and created. Yet the investiture of the divine image, in the image of God created he him, signifies that there is reflected in man the image of immortality as a pattern which man is destined, if he will accept the will of God, to outpicture line upon line throughout his infinite existence. In the ultimate sense, then, man would truly become not merely the created, but the creator. This transfer of responsibility in the domain of self is so subtle that many pass through embodiment after embodiment of religious seeking as well as intellectual accomplishment without cognizing the basic facts stated herein. Yet some measure of thought and attunement is perhaps required before the full understanding dawns with all of its wonder upon mankind. Herein lies a phase of the great macrocosmic-microcosmic interchange. The Creator, with all of his wisdom and grace, has no need of the mechanical sense, for by the simple power of the will to do, all life bows to obey in the infinite world of God. The phrase made a little lower than the angels and crowned with glory and honor signifies that mankind holds within his hand of thought and feeling, most specifically within his hand of acceptance as an individual monad, the full authority for his world. Let the ages roll. Let universes as scrolls unfold and be unfolded. The being of man can never attain to his predestined God magnificence until the will of man submits to do so, and thus there is a certain incongruous appearing action in the divine plan, judged from the human level. But I assure you, all who read my words, that there is no dichotomy in the Godhead. There are no chasms within the mind of Christ. The highway of holiness and God purity, which stands before every man who will invoke it, is yet a clear and beautiful way that leads back to the heart of the Creator. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while thy evil days come not, refers to the purposes of incarnation. How can men dream or suppose that God should give to man less than the allness of himself? And thus the co-equal nature of all life is exposed. So-called individual accomplishment becomes a matter of choice and application, and the responsibility for the furthering of the divine plan is revealed as the opportunity of individualization. The Master Jesus, in his Watch With Me 1-hour program for the current age, thus did stress the potential of you, the responsibility of each individual for the development of his latent talents and his ability to serve the cause of the divine life. History is replete with the magnificent experiences and accomplishments of those men called saints. There is no myth behind these episodes in many cases, and often good men rendered so by divine action implanted upon the earth through their form and being were more excellent than portrayed. It matters not that some few were glamorized beyond their attainment. I am certain that their aspirations were even higher than the image portrayed. Heaven has not conspired to man's condemnation, but to his emancipation, and thus I proclaim it now in this series on the mechanization concept. The freedom of man lies as a gift in his hand. When he desires it enough, it will manifest in part, and little by little he will merge from the cave of materiality and the mechanical sense into the light of divine grace. Even the concept of chastity and chastisement are linked. The phrase, "Whom the Lord loveth he chasteneth," should be understood as the action of spirit, divine and pure, chastening the flesh form that cannot inherit the kingdom of God, in order that the soul consciousness abiding therein may do so. I must return to individualization as the breaking of the bread of heaven and the coming of the body of God into individual portion. Those who desire the Lord's body in themselves, therefore, commune with God, the part entering in to the greater degree of assimilation of the whole. This is the meaning of holiness or wholeness. Yet it is not to the banal aspects of mortality that men must draw nigh, but to the original Puritan design of the Godhead. Unfortunately, the sinister force has often drawn an image of austerity around the idea of purity. In examining the early history of New England, many become obsessed with the idea either of a hypocritical purity practiced on the surface and a libertinism practiced in secret, or of an austerity of soul mortifying the very possibility of happiness for the entire colony. Fortunately, in the eyes of then contemporary men, neither was true. For whereas some in every age have been hypocritical and deceitful, many, and especially the founders and leaders of the early colonies in America, were earnest and honest in their desire to find God and to worship Him in relative peace and security. I cite many of these examples in order to engender balance in our students and those who would pursue the divine path. The way back to the heart of God may have its difficulties, but I am certain that honest men will recognize that the way away from the heart of God has many more. Inasmuch as one day all outgoing life streams must return to God's heart, it will appear to be wholly reasonable that the closer men stay to the fold, the less journey they must traverse on their return, whereas the farther they wander away, the longer the journey back to the heart of peace will be. Unfortunately, the memory of man does not retain the fullness of the divine experience of the soul at higher levels prior to embodiment. Only the few are cognizant of the glories of the angels. It is true that in the dream state, when man is temporarily released from the body, as well as after the change which men call death, individuals often do contact the higher reaches of life and find the freedom of inner levels more clearly manifest than when they were embodied. The frustrations an unascended men encounter, however, are those created by the bounds of men's habitations, which are fixed by reason of their attainment or its lack, while they are yet embodied. For life itself is wedded to consciousness and individual self-awareness, so that choices may be made and experiences had. It is not the divine intent that these experiences shall be merely a series of vain, repetitious meanderings along the stream of life. For the great freedom of divine grace to explore the cosmos and the wonders of being are the gifts of God to every man, His for the taking. Some men, moving as on a conveyor belt, hold the cup of their consciousness up to the drippings of God's energy and spill that energy over into the void and abyss as fast as it is dispensed to them. Others hoard it, tucking it away, as though by reason of the accumulation of substance or power or whatsoever they hoard, they may stand above others upon the path. Let me make clear that all the energy in the cosmos is available to the call of God, and when men identify with His plan, the cup of their consciousness as divine right use will expand as an infinite elasticity, which will enable them to do as Christ did, to multiply the loaves and fishes of life, and to feed the multitudes the living word. I am come to touch the hearts of the downtrodden, and to lift them up. I am come to heal those who are bruised and cut, to apply the unguents and balms of purification to those who require it, and to seal the beauty of God's holiness in the borders of men's garments, embroidering there the delicate pastel pink threads of divine love, the pale yellow illumination flooding the soul with the sunshine of God's mind, and the mighty electric blue threads of power to fulfill the requirements of each hour that manifests. Even the challenges of opposition, the tests which men face, the fire-breathing dragons of men's hates, despairs, and sense of hopelessness, these must be conquered by the sword of faith in the reality of self, of opportunity, of choice. For the freedom to choose is yet the gift of God to man, and it ought to increase the respect and gratitude of the honest and sincere for the eternal purposes. Observe in history how many so-called great men, conquerors of domain, have sought to subjugate others beneath their feet, whereas the Christ revealed the Father image, and the masters today have revealed in his name the image of the Mother of the world. Contemporary man, then, surrounded with a multitude of religious delusions and the mechanistic, materialistic, existentialistic, false senses of the world order, accepted by the multitudes in part, are face to face with the great need to recognize the golden veins of truth buried in the heart of the earth, awaiting discovery by mankind who, as miners, lay claim to that which they can esteem as precious unto themselves. In stressing the great gift of God to man, I point out that recognition plays so great a role here. For some, for the most precious gems, if considered trinkets or baubles, would scarcely bring a fair price in the marketplace. Were I a material author now, seeking to find name or fame, or to select a price tag upon my words, I would not dare, in mankind's sense of good taste, to impose myself upon you in the fashion which I do here in these series. But because I do not care for the fig-leaf consciousness of mankind, and because I do care for the immortal soul, and for the task of raising mankind out of a host of pitiful delusions and illusions, I can truly state that this series requires a great deal of review and attention and concentration, plus prayerful attunement, in order that the very subtle and hidden points placed herein may be of great benefit to the soul. Many are already deriving immense benefit from this series, and those who shall in future times to come are also a great multitude, but the greatest impartation which I can make to you is the knowledge of the power of choice. For it is in your acceptance of this power and your action to recognize how great is your responsibility to outpicture the divine image that you shall become truly great. The words of the centurion, "Truly, this was the Son of God," ought justly to be spoken of every life stream, but it cannot be so until the individual has accepted it. May I build a shrine to you, precious life stream. May I adorn that shrine, circular in form, with bowers of beautiful flowers. May I saturate the air with the fragrances of spring and the release of sweet perfumes. May I perceive above this shrine a low vault of blue, that thy hands may reach up and touch the gentle hands of the angelic hosts. May I point out at your feet lie the little people, the elementals, who have served both body and needs of substance. May I hope that you will take your seat in the shrine of true selfhood. Remember these words: face to face with thyself shalt thou come ere thy journey endeth home. Gratefully I am, the great Divine Director.